The Circle of Knowledge podcast is brought to you by Amplified Minds, helping entrepreneurs and professionals achieve their goals and aspirations by sharing a wealth of knowledge to you, our community of achievers. This podcast features best-selling industry resources, interviews, and the professional panel discussion by the core team at Amplified Minds. Now, here are their discussions. Hey, everybody. This is Jon Kovach. Welcome to the Circle of Knowledge podcast. We are super excited to talk to today's guest, and I'm really excited because I've gotten to know this person just this over the last year, since January of this year. And up to this point, we've had many exchanges and some great conversations. The opportunity to interview and introduce this individual on a really well-known stage, the Habitude Warrior stage. And I want to give a quick shout out to Eric Swanson for allowing me the opportunity to introduce and become acquainted with and friends with Dr. Steve Taubman, author of the book Bulletproof. How are you doing today, Dr. Steve Taubman?
Thanks. And shout out to Eric. Thank you so much for putting us all together. And he's assembled quite the community. I'm really excited about it.
He really has. And, that's what's attracted to me to the Habitude Warrior family, really, because, we were in Houston right before the world shut down. And that was this February. And even then, a room full of, 200 strangers, and you feel like family when you walk home. It was really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I want to begin by sharing with my listeners a little bit about how I met you. So I got to know Steve as we were preparing for the Habitude Warrior conference in Houston, Texas, this past February 2020. And I was a new MC. I was MCing for the Habitude Warrior community. I was kind of learning under the reins of some of our expert MCs. I typically get to speak on stages, but Eric and I had decided on an idea that would allow me to MC and get to know his speakers and get to know his family. And that was a really good opportunity for me. So here I am learning everyone's names, trying to learn everyone. And Dr. Steve Taubman is one of Eric's great friends. And he's also, one of the trusted partners and helped fill that room. He's an amazing salesperson in that regard. And it was awesome because Steve run in the room. Like most of the people there were because of Steve. And as we're sitting there, I'm realizing how important this guy is. And then we're standing there on stage and I make a bold move. And I said, look, we got to move the schedule along. I'm going to introduce the next person. Totally skipped over Dr. Steve Taubman's name. And we announced the next person who was 5 minutes early. And then they came up on stage, did their 15-minute reel. And then we got up on stage, and then I had the opportunity, an awesome, exciting example of being able to share with people a quick introduction for Dr. Steve Taubman. And he came onto the stage, and he rocked it, and he killed it, and it was awesome. And I just remembered that because you probably don't remember that, but I do. It was a unique position I had, and I was grateful for the learning opportunity. Made a mistake right in the first few minutes of my MCing career, but I loved it because I got to see people like Steve who are expert authors, incredible speakers, awesome leaders. They know their stuff and they're flexible. They jump on stage and they can do their thing, and they do it probably better than if I had just followed the schedule anyways. So that was kind of the background of how I got to meet and really get to know Steve. And I appreciate your patience and your awesome energy. And anyways, without any further ado, I want to tee the ball off to you, Steve, and give you an opportunity to talk about your background before we dive into some concepts and some stuff on your book and talk about some knowledge.
Well, if it's okay with you, just to kind of dovetail off what you just said, I didn't remember it until you said it. And then I recall that experience, and I recall you being a little nervous about having blown it, so to speak. But what I got out of that whole experience was you're great at what you do. You've just got a great demeanor. You were really, you handled the situation really well with lots of, love and dignity, and you didn't fall into that, play like shame spiral that some people go into when they screw something up. And, I'd like to think I might have had something to do with that by not being a jerk about it. But, you know, for all of us, I think it's great as we start becoming more and more comfortable with making mistakes, right? I mean, isn't that that's one of the things I like to talk about is, you know, how do you maintain an even keel? Well, part of it is don't try to be perfect. You know, maintain a sense of humor about your imperfections. So, yeah. So anyway, so you wanted to hear a little bit about my word.
Please tell us a little bit about your backstory.
So I was a chiropractic physician. I had one of the largest chiropractic sports medicine practices in the nation. But when I finally decided it was time to try something new, and, you know, I think most people, they get into something and they get successful at it. They assume they've got to keep doing it for the rest of their lives.
Right.
So that their job, their career, their identity then defines them versus them defining it. And I learned, maybe to some extent the hard way, that life works a lot better when you kind of check in with yourself and decide if you're in the right place at the right time. So it turned out I wasn't. It turned out that as much as I was financially successful and I was doing some good work, I wasn't fulfilled. And I lost my mojo for being a chiropractor. And I tried to get it back. And eventually I hit a point in my career where everything I did to try to like climb back up the hill was just, you know, scrambling. And there was a moment where I was I was in a chiropractic seminar. It was like a habitude warrior for chiropractors, motivating speakers, you know, some of the same people we have on our stages. We got a guy up there by the name of Joe Felicia, who is a great motivational speaker. Okay. And he's talking about how great it is to be a chiropractor. And, you know, we're all should be so proud and happy and excited. And I wasn't, you know, and I wished I was, you know, I tried to be, but I wasn't. And so at the time, this was back in 1995, I think, before we had the internet or anything, you know, and I had a magazine with me in the back. I was sitting in the back of the room, which I never used to do, right? I was the front of the room guy. And I pulled up the chiropractic magazine, and in the back, I found an ad for a company that evaluates practices to sell. And I got up in the middle of the seminar and I walked out to a payphone. Again, no cell phones really. And I called this company and I said, I'm selling my practice. And it was just like, that's it. I'm out of here. And it happened that quick. Like, I mean, the process then had to take a year to unfold, but the decision was instantaneous. It was like, you know, when you get that in your gut. So then my life got really interesting. And I traveled. I spent a year. Well, at first I spent a few months in Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador. Yeah. And then, you know, I kind of worked on myself and kind of introspected about what's next in my life. Had a lot of amazing, magical experiences that if we had time for, I'd tell you those stories. And then I hopped in my plane. I was a private pilot, and I hopped in my plane and traveled all around the country for several more months. And then I took an interest in hypnosis. And it began to fascinate me. I had some background because as a sports medicine doctor, you're always a little bit aware, and you always have some of those tools in your tool belt to help people psych themselves for success, you know, and, you know, championship. But to look at it from the perspective of a stagecraft, right, and then also therapeutically, that was kind of new. And I became a hypnotist. I traveled around the country. I did hypnosis shows. I was the official hypnotist for MTV Spring Break for a few years. Wow. Yeah, I did a lot of interesting things. And while I was performing hypnosis in Jamaica, and I had a kid on stage. I'm sure I've told you this story. I had a kid on stage. I said, he was hypnotized. I said, when you wake up, 3 things are going to happen. I said, number 1, you don't believe you're hypnotized, even though you are. I said, number 2, this is the worst show you've ever seen, and you are aggravated with me. And I said, number 3, there's an invisible wall 3 feet in front of you. So I woke everybody up. I said, how's everybody doing? This guy screams, you suck. So he said, what's the problem? He says, the show's terrible. I said, well, leave. The guy gets up. He takes 3 steps and he starts pushing and pushing, and he finally gives up, and he sits back down, and he crosses his arms, and he starts to pout like this. And I said, what's the problem? He goes, nothing. I said, are you hypnotized? He goes, no. I said, are you having fun? He goes, no. I said, well, then why don't you leave? And the guy thinks for a minute, and he goes, I'm not going to give you the satisfaction. And it was this giant epiphany for me, because I realized that's all of us in life, right? We're all stuck behind our invisible walls. Sometimes we call it our comfort zone, and we try to apply will and force and effort to try to move beyond and get something new in our lives. And then we hit this wall. We don't know why, but all of a sudden we lose motivation. We become aggravated, overwhelmed, afraid, and we're stuck. So I started exploring that from the perspective of mindfulness and hypnosis, and this idea that what if we're all hypnotized? What if we're all kind of a little bit asleep, a little bit programmed? And that led me to my first book, which was called Unhypnosis. And that's what put me on stages. That's what got me out there speaking. Thanks, TJ. We got some beautiful people here. We got Jennifer and TJ who are popping in and saying hi. So thanks for shouting out.
Yeah.
And I think you were being interviewed or are going to be interviewed by Jen, and she interviewed me yesterday, and she's doing an awesome job with her new podcast. So big shout out to Jen Leeds. Really, really awesome. So so that became my new secondary career. I was still entertaining, but at the same time speaking and writing. And my latest book, Bulletproof, has been an interesting departure because it's still in the same vein. It's still about, our mindset and how our mindsets influence our success. But where my first book was about using those principles to reinvent yourself the way I had, this book is about how to maximize your capacity while you're doing what you're doing. So that's it. And I love the picture. It was designed by Brad Zales, who's a great graphic artist. And here's this woman in the middle who's a professional, right? And she's trying to she's successul, but look at all the stuff coming at her, right? There's the bullhorn, and there's, you've got to be on the phone, and you've got to do this. My favorite one is the sandwich. Are you hungry? So all the different ways in which we're being aggravated and irritated and distracted, and what do we do to become bulletproof? What's our semi-permeable membrane that keeps us from falling into the abyss and not being able to maintain that positive attitude that gets us where we want to go? Which, sometimes it's, I call it a semi-permeable membrane because love gets in, right? Joy gets in, but aggravation stays out. And how can you develop those skills? And that's what this book is about.
I absolutely love it. And I don't want to give too much away for our listeners, but I definitely want them to go check out the book, which we'll tell them how to do that in just a minute. Yeah. But as I dove into the book a little bit, one of the things I wanted to share, and we don't have to make this the center of topic, but I definitely wanted to share this because we talk a lot about it on my show. Okay. And in chapter 3, in the Start with Happiness section, what your first 3 steps in starting with happiness and focusing on that mindset. The first one is reject conditional happiness. Yes. Okay. And then the second one is express gratitude. And the third, but there's more points, so listeners, go get the book and read more, is take care of yourself. And these are three aspects that we talk a lot about on the Circle of Knowledge just by nature, because there's a lot of people talk about, what are the things that you need to do to achieve higher levels of success. And a lot of it's just take care of yourself and don't accept conditional happiness, accept abundance of happiness. So I wanted to lead in with that. And I love that part. And I can't wait to finish that chapter as I'm reading the book currently. And, and then shout out to Jennifer Leeds too, who I just finished her book last night. So finishing that up so I can get through all these. But I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing a little bit about Bulletproof. And I'd love to know what's in the works right now. What's going on in Steve Taubman's world? What's something that you guys you're currently working on developing or offering to people you've worked with and your future clients?
Got a couple passion projects that are related to each other. One of them is, my background as a mindfulness coach and as a hypnotist, from the therapeutic standpoint, that evolved into stage work, doing a lot of both funny hypnosis, but also doing hypnosis to empower people and have them kind of flip the switch so that they could see there's a new way of looking at their lives. But hypnosis is also a great one-on-one modality. You could use it to help people quit smoking, lose weight, get rid of a habit or a fear or a phobia. And it also so happens that hypnosis is particularly in conjunction with NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. It's a kind of a language pattern approach that's associated with hypnosis and mindfulness. Those tools are really helpful for shifting your through the power of suggestion, shifting your mindset so that your immune system can actually function better, which is amazing. So there's 45 years of very, very compelling studies about this. It's called psychoneuroimmunology. Wow. So psychoneuroimmunology, how does your thoughts affect your your nervous system, in turn affect your immunological system? And we know now, we understand the neural pathways that happen and why it is that certain thoughts will create cortisol release and others will cause a release of serotonin, and what that will then do to the at the nerve endings where the immune cells live, and what kind of cells are being produced and what kind of cytokines are those cells releasing, and are they pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory? Are they causing excess tissue growth? So let me give you an example of a few things that hypnosis has a high success rate with.
Okay.
Psoriasis.
Really?
Yeah, who'd think it, right? It's like, what does my brain have to do with my skin? Everything. Okay, so psoriasis, eczema, asthma, some aspects of diabetes, sometimes reversing it, sometimes just helping with the peripheral blood flow. We also know that your autonomic nervous system is under the control of your brain, even though under the control of your conscious brain, not just your unconscious. We always assumed that all the autonomic functions, the beating of your heart, the way blood is dispersed throughout your body, well, that's all automatic. It's all autonomic. It's all involuntary. But it turns out that you could direct your attention to different limbs. You can make one limb hotter than the other. You can make your heart go faster or slower if you know how, if you've been trained, right? So anyway, so psychoneuroimmunology, what I'm doing right now is I'm offering one-on-one therapy sessions with people and helping them with chronic pain, disease, the secondary effect from diseases. I worked with a woman who's got has coughing fits. I've got somebody else who's got menstrual issues, and there's all these different things for which hypnosis can be a really valuable tool. So that's the first passion project, and I've got a website for it called suggestionhealing.com.
Okay.
So if you guys want to check that out, it gives you more understanding of this principle. And then the other thing is, I was talking to Steve Samblis. I think you might know who Steve is. He's the person who created the One Habit series, right? The One Habit book.
Right.
Awesome. And the first of those books was called, the 100 Habits from the Happiest Achievers on the Planet. And apparently I'm one of them. I didn't realize I was one of the happiest achievers on the planet.
Hey, I believe
man, I'm in the book. So anyway, that's becoming like a series, just like Chicken Soup for the Soul, right? It's a great series because they're short chapters. They're inspiring. They're wonderful. And you've got like dozens of great writers, contributors. So I decided I'm going to go ahead and compile the newest book. So my next passion project is we're doing the One Habit for Body, Mind Healing. And I'm going to be assembling, some of the great minds of the world who have spoken on that topic. Some of the people on my wish list who I haven't reached out to yet are people like Bernie Siegel.
Okay, cool.
Joe Dispenza, John DeMartini, the people who have really worked, Deepak Chopra, those kind of people. So I want to see some of those names in that book. And we'll have other people who may not be as well known, but have done some brilliant work in that area.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome. Well, I love the passion projects you're currently working on, and how timely is your current offering and working with individuals to help heal themselves. Suggestion healing is an awesome concept. As we've talked a lot on this show, unfortunately, I don't like to get into politics much, but it's inevitable at the point right now. And so we've been talking about how COVID-19 has really hurt those people who already have compromised systems, like the slow drip or, some sort of inflammation, of course, or just any kind of thing. And yes, healthy people are dying, but there are also the people at most risk are the people with compromised systems. And how you could help yourself is to have your mind tell your systems, okay, to be stronger, to be better, to be healthier. And I love that. And I think that's really important. And I know that there's a lot of listeners out there, out of the 20,000 people that listen to this show, I would say that one of you or some of you are probably experiencing some sort of form of anxiety or some sort of form of fear in regards to all this. And so this is a great resource for them. This is an awesome resource for a lot of people.
It's funny. I mean, to some extent, because of who you are and you're the kind of love you project and the sense of possibility that you project out to your audience, we're probably preaching to the choir to some extent. Like most people probably understand this, but in case there are people out there who hear this and think, oh, that's nonsense. My thoughts have nothing to do with my physical body.
Right.
We now have so much research on this. And there's a guy that you may want to look up who fascinates me. He's another one that I want to get in this book. His name is Wim Hof.
Wim Hof.
Yeah, W-I-M is his first name. H-O-F is his last name. I don't know his nationality. I want to say he might be Scandinavian, but I don't want to swear to that. But for the last few decades, he's considered to be the most studied human being in terms of physiology, because he started a practice back about 40 years ago of submerging himself in ice water and then doing all kinds of other remarkable things called breathing techniques. He started out with an understanding of basic spiritual practices like meditation and had read a lot. But one day he decided to jump into some ice water. I don't know what prompted him to do this, but he did it, right? So he's discovered that through breathing techniques and focusing of his mind in a particular way, in a particular pattern, along with exposure to ice and cold, that he's been able to completely change his body's response to disease. And one of the studies that's been done on him, now, by the way, this is a guy who hiked up Mount Everest to the death zone in his shorts.
Oh my God.
Only his shorts. He also did a marathon above the Arctic Circle barefoot in shorts. He's been submerged in ice water for up to 2 hours, and all of these things have been studied, and he's had EKGs and various tests conducted on him throughout the process. He can maintain his body temperature, which we can't do for more than 8 minutes. He could do it for up to 2 hours in ice water. And one of the experiments is they inject him with bacterial, parts of bacteria that should elicit the response of illness, like flu-like symptoms. And anybody else who does it in the control group gets sick. Nothing. He doesn't get sick. So he says this is it's not unique to me. It's the exercise. It's the practice. So let me teach you the practice. And so that's part of what I do in my work is I help people understand some of these practices that you can start doing. And, it doesn't take you all day to change your physiology and therefore your immune system. And part of it is monitoring your thinking. Am I thinking anxious thoughts?
Right.
Am I catastrophizing? Am I living in the future? Am I seeing a vision of what's going to be the bad outcome versus what the good outcome is going to be? And what do I need to do to discipline myself not to do that?
I absolutely love that. And man, we could go into so many directions. I do want to ask you, as we get into some of these things that you've already touched on a little bit, the golden nuggets of wisdom that you would like to share with my listeners. Let's first talk about that principle of how does someone become, bulletproof? How do they wick that out of their lives?
So, of course, the book, if you want to really kind of learn and then study and then practice the principles and the steps, there are 5 overarching principles, and each of them has practices. There are things you do for each of these. So the first one is start with happiness as the intention, not start with happiness as in, I'm put on a happy face. What we're talking about is be aware of where you are in regard to happiness, and don't, as you said, reject conditional happiness. Don't think that if you're not happy, you're going to be happy once you get the new car. Right. But then you follow the 13 principles in that chapter to begin to get some control over. Thank you, Jen. To get some control over your sense of happiness, right? So then the second part is what I call clean up your act outside and in, which is about living by a code, right? Like Don Quixote, the impossible dream, the quest. What is your code of conduct? How do you behave? How do you allow yourself the luxury to think regardless of what's going on around you? Are you disciplined or are you undisciplined? If you're disciplined, then stuff happens and you say, I might want to feel this way, or I might want to strike out in this way, but I won't because I've got a code of conduct, right? And that's so important to this practice of discipline. The discipline is such an important part of the practice of Bulletproof, because if you're thrown off course by everything, then you haven't disciplined yourself. You won't do any of the other steps either, right? So the third step has to do with sharpening your focus, learning how to be present, be here now. That's where meditation or other mindfulness practices come in. Going out and just try something simple. Take a walk for 15 minutes and see if you can do it and enjoy the beauty around you without thinking, right? It's almost impossible, right? We're so undisciplined in our thinking. So just gradually developing the capacity to notice when your thinking is taking you astray and coming back. Oh yeah, wait a minute. I'm here. I'm now. It's beautiful. Look at that tree. Look at that. Feel that air. It's awesome, right? So that kind of, there are a series of practices in that chapter that discipline your mind and strengthen your ability to be here now. And you're not going to do it just by thinking it's a good idea.
Right.
And then we get into some of the fruits of all this work, which are the concept of leaning in, which means, what do you do when something aggravating happens or when, you feel triggered in some way? Do you run from it? Do you go into fight or flight? Do you go into your head and try to figure out what you're going to say to that person to show that you're right and they're wrong? Or do you notice that you just got triggered and you say, interesting. I guess I better sit quietly and let myself feel these feelings until they dissolve. Right? It's a different reality regarding upset. Right. And again, that's great for being bulletproof, because if something happens and you go into reaction, well, then you're just you're basically spinning deeper into it. But if you learn to like just kind of be with it, it's like the only way out is through. Let me just move through this experience and come out the other side. I'll feel clean. I'll feel free and fresh. Again, there are practices to do that. And then lastly, what I call assemble your lifeboats, which basically means what does your support system look like? Do you have it? Or are you waiting until you're upset and then it's too late?
Right.
So then we talk about that. What can you do? What are the questions you need to ask the people around you? What are the ways that you need to prepare your friends so they know what it looks like for you to be supported? And what are some of the other things you do? What are the systems you've put in place? Like I'm a pilot, right? So if my plane loses power at 8,000 feet, I pull the visor down and I look at the checklist and I go through dun, 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 dun. That's my lifeboat. That's my checklist. What's your checklist? Do you have one? All right. So
I love it.
That's the process.
Amazing. So in the process of becoming bulletproof, one of the first steps is mindfulness. And as you focus on the right things, how does the healing of body begin to work?
Well, I guess what we know about that is that there's this tremendous neurological relationship between thought and physiology. Right? And in a million different subtle ways, we are holding our physical limitations in place, right? Maybe we're tightening small muscles in such a way that blood flow is restricted in certain areas of our body, right? Maybe we're restricting our breath because that's what happens when you're anxious is you don't get that feeling of being short of breath. You can't get the breath in. You can't get enough air. Well, that oxygen is hugely important to your healing, right? If you could permeate your cells with enough oxygen and blow off enough carbon dioxide, there's less waste products. Your body's going to be more effective at healing itself. And ultimately, it comes down to communication, which is that from the time that the first amoeba split into two, and now we had two cells, the most important attribute of health became how do they talk to each other? Right? How do we work together? And now you're billions of cells, trillions of cells. They need to talk to each other. And are there blockages? And are those blockages at the level of your thinking? Right? And if they're not, maybe I'm a chiropractor too. So those blockages might be physiological blockages. Maybe I've got to adjust somebody and get pressure off their nerves. But we're always looking to see at what level, at the very highest level possible, that we can impact the flow. And of course, there's no higher level than your subconscious mind, which is kind of your connection to the universe, your connection to God, if you will. Right.
Wow. Okay. That's amazing. I know that there's so many things that we could get into. I think my biggest and only invitation to everyone is to go get a copy of Bulletproof so that you can understand and dive into the weeds a little bit more of how to start beginning these practices, because it focuses on a mindset or a mindfulness, and then transferring that into a physiological change that comes from the comparison and the relationship that your thoughts have with your body, mind, and health.
Bingo. That was nicely said. That kind of wove it all together. Tyson has a question. He's asking, how does one obtain this level of consciousness? Are there things we can do to assist the process or allow us to surrender to the process? And each of the steps we talked about in Bulletproof are those steps that you're asking about. And what you need to understand, Tyson, and all of us have to understand, is that the process doesn't happen overnight, which means that it's not just that that we are not going to get there as quick as we want, but the fact that we in our heads have a tendency to want things to happen overnight. And when they don't, we go back into our heads, we go back into self-criticism, we lose our patience, we get aggravated, and then we take two steps backwards. So what I would say to you right now is that if you want to obtain a higher level of consciousness, cultivate patience, cultivate a little bit of, and humor. It's like, oh, there I go again. I just flew off the handle. I just acted like a jerk. That kind of like, compassion toward yourself goes a long way, because the practices will produce results. Like if you sit down and you meditate 10 minutes a day, by the end of a week, you'll notice something. It may not be like your whole life has changed, but you'll notice that something that would have pissed you off before doesn't now. The way I notice it now is like yesterday, I was a friend of mine asked me to drive him to pick up his car and bring it to another place where they were going to fix it. So he dropped it off at one mechanic. That mechanic couldn't fix it. I had dropped him off at that one the day before. Now I had to go drive him over there, get his car, drive it to another mechanic, and then take him home. So And, it was going to be a little chunk of my day because they were far apart, but, I'm cool with it. So I get in the car and we drive, we do the thing, and we get to halfway through the drive from one mechanic to the other, and a tractor trailer apparently overturned and caught fire on the highway. And we didn't know that that's what it was at first, but we were stuck in stopped traffic for like an hour. And if it were like 5 years ago, I would have gone ballistic, right? I would have just been, what's going on here? And I would have been like, that feeling when you're in traffic and you're going like this, you're like scooching, as if you could scooch the car forward faster. It's just like this sort of knee-jerk reaction. Well, because I had done all this work, this consciousness raising work, and meditated, it wasn't like now I know to tell myself not to feel upset. It's that I just don't feel upset. I'm just like, okay, well, this is what's happening now. Like Eckhart Tolle says, do you have something against reality? Right? What's your beef with reality? This is reality right now. Just chill. This is reality. And again, the other one is the serenity prayer, right? Grant me the courage to, or the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? Which most people don't know.
I relate with that so well. When I was an 8th grader, I was on the 8th grade football team of our junior high school. And I showed up to game day, went to the locker room only to find that all of my gear, except for my helmet and my cleats, had been stolen. And so I had to go and, get a bunch of other gear and jerseys and stuff, which caused me to be late. And one of the coaches had to personally drive me to the game. And I was so nervous and so mad and so frustrated, and traffic was just the worst. And he looked at me and he says, son, the key, this is just like a taste or an inkling of what you described, but I got this as an 8th grader. And he said, the key to being in a hurry is to not be in a hurry. And I was like, you're right. Just sitting here being mad and frustrated and hating the world about all the things that just happened to me isn't going to make it better. Why don't I just be in the present and just say, you know what? I'm not turning the emotions off to the world, but that was a huge lesson for me. So now you and I see, we can sit in traffic and just be like, well, I guess that's what we're here for, right? We're here for that today. That's funny.
Yeah. That's like, so, the example you gave at the very beginning about, putting somebody else on stage before me. It's like, it had no impact on me. It was just like, I guess I'm going up later, or I'm not going up at all, or something else is going to happen. I mean, right. It's all good. And I love that you had that lesson given to you at the age of like, whatever that is, 14 years old. I wish I got that lesson at the age of 14. It would have saved me a lot of aggravation in years to come. But I'll tell you a funny story about that. I had, going back a little earlier, I had a woman working for me in my chiropractic practice years ago, who was emotionally unstable and kind of angry, and also turned out to be very dishonest. She was just not the kind of person you would want to have in your life. And when I sold my chiropractic practice, she sued me for wrongful termination, even though, I hadn't wrongfully terminated her. I'd left the practice, but she still sued me, and I still had to deal with the potential that I might lose something, because who knows how a court case is going to play out. So I was nervous and neurotic and I had anguish, and I wasn't sleeping through the night, and it was hell. And then, of course, it all ended up fine. Well, then a few years later, I had some circumstances arise where I was selling my airplane, and I sold it to a guy who was supposed to, it was a check that I needed to clear before I sent him the title to the plane.
Okay.
And he said, I had the check, and the bank said, yeah, the check cleared. So I released the title to him. So now he owns the plane. And then he canceled the check, which I didn't know was possible. So basically, he ripped me off for like $65,000. And I started going to the same spiral of like, oh my God, what happens if I can't reclaim this, if I can't recover it? And so at first it was really, really tense, right? It's really painful and scary. And thankfully I remembered the Jan incident from a few years earlier. And I said, I can't spend another bunch of sleepless nights until this problem resolves. I've got to be happy now. And because I'll be most effective dealing with it. So I said, the first thing I need to do, and this is one of the things in this book, is called reframing. Reframing. If you're unhappy about something, reframe it, right? Look at it from a different angle. So here's how I reframe that. I said, All right. So I'm out $65,000. Do I still have a house? Yeah. Do I still have a car? Yeah. Do I still have friends? Yeah. Am I still going to eat tomorrow? Yeah. That means that I'm a guy who could afford to lose $65,000. I felt great. I was like, yeah, that means I'm pretty affluent, man. I'm okay. And, not that it made it that much better, but it did. It really kind of helped. It made me feel from the right perspective. And these things happen all the time. I've got this woman who's been a friend and then sometimes not a friend in my life, who she's got some things going on in her life. And she borrowed a chair from me. This is about 3 or 4 weeks ago. She borrowed my desk chair.
Oh, wow.
And then she kind of cut off communication with me, and I can't get her to respond to me about giving me my chair back. And I could feel myself getting, what do I do? Do I go and, like break into her house and steal? What do I do? Right. And then I do the work, right? Then I'm like, okay, so watch yourself, notice what's going on inside of you and how you're letting yourself be made upset by something what's the worst case scenario? What does a chair cost? Right. So that's what I did. I just said, okay, enjoy the chair. You've got a chair now. Now I'll go get a chair and I'll never have to think about it again.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. These have been incredible principles, and I could listen to this all day. I really appreciate the knowledge you've shared with my listeners and the mindfulness and the teachings. And then I think naturally we covered that next segment of my podcast series, which is, the challenge we want to issue to our listeners is, practice that mindfulness. Is there anything you'd like to add to that challenge to give these guys on the path or on the road to observing that and applying, that mind-body healing?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's kind of a structure to this. So first of all, think of the whole thing as a game. Right? It's all a big game. You're like a scientist in the lab doing experiments and seeing how different things work. And it makes life more interesting when you do that, right? So I wonder what happens if I treat this situation this other way instead of the way I've been treating it. So I'm going to give you an example of what you could do, and this will be the challenge, right? And understanding the background of the challenge is that you're going to be much better at the challenge if you are first doing some basic practices, do some meditating, do some, going out in nature, do something to kind of really get quiet and be present, right? Because the more you do that, the more of these challenges you'll be able to meet the challenge effectively. So here's the challenge. The next time that something upsetting happens, okay, and you are poised and ready to maybe fight or pout or whatever it is, and you find yourself going into your head about it, in other words, you're really like, you're right, they're wrong. What am I going to do to make them realize that they're idiots? When you're in that state, go back into the place of the noticing presence, the witness, right? Oh, there I go feeling that way. And here's what you're going to do instead. If it's something where, like, let's say John and I are having a fight right now, right? And I'm like, he's just irritating me. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the bathroom, or I'm going to walk away. I'm going to get out of the situation. So these are the steps. Number one, remove yourself, right? Just far enough that you could take a few deep breaths. Or just get out of the line of fire. Number two, as quickly as possible, turn your attention from the thing that's bothering you to the feeling of being bothered. Okay, so the thing that's bothering me, I can't believe John did this. I can't believe he did that. I'm really upset with him for this. And the next time I talk to him, I'm going to do that. And then this happened, and that's me replaying. That's me telling myself the story. Now what I do is I shift my focus, and I'm like, oh, okay, I feel tense here. I feel pain in my throat here. My face is getting hot. All of my inquiry becomes what it feels like inside of me right now. All right. And then the next step is to identify all of that as if it were an entity inside of you, like a bundle that's got a size and a shape and a density and a color. So now I'm just sitting here. I'm noticing that I've got this big bundle of ick inside of me.
Right.
I just breathe into it softly, and I allow it to begin to change, and I watch for it to dissolve and shift. And maybe I like watch it shrink and then I throw it away. But I work with the experience rather than the thing that caused the experience. And if you start shifting from that, what you're going to be doing is, in essence, you're going to be taking the experience of sitting by a fire, and if you keep throwing another log on the fire keeps burning, right?
Right.
But if you stop throwing logs on it, the fire by nature has to burn out. Well, the logs are your thoughts. And if you keep thinking about the problem, all you're doing is throwing more logs on the fire just keeps burning and burning and burning. But if you say, I'm just going to sit here and watch the fire, you know what? It's not even that unpleasant. When you decide you're just going to sit and be present to the physical stuff going on inside of you that feels like anger or irritation, and you just watch it. It's almost like watching a fire. It's like it's burning, but eventually, if you don't think about the stuff, it's just burning out. So the challenge is utilize that process. Cut off the situation, turn your attention from the thing that provoked it to the sensations in your body. Just and experiment. See what happens if you just let yourself feel the feelings.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that challenge. And to all of our listeners, please take the time to obtain this knowledge and start it into practice, put it into play, and begin to feel that change. Steve, how is the best way that my listeners could reach you?
Well, you come over. I'm here at 47 North Shore Drive.
Which is an awesome place. When we get on the phone or on a Zoom call with Steve, he's out on the yard. He's out working. He's got beautiful trees around. It's awesome.
Yeah, Woody and I are on the bike path. So first thing is my main website is stevetaubman.com. So you can find me at stevetaubman.com, and you can read my blog posts and my podcast and all that other good stuff. Thank you, Jen, and Tyson. Thanks for that reiteration of that line. That's a great thing to remember. Work within the experience rather than the cause of the experience. So my main website. The other one we already talked about was Suggestion Healing, if you're interested in this body-mind connection. And then lastly, I have kind of a gift for you guys. And if any of you are interested in the old try before you buy concept, go to bestofsteve.com. And bestofsteve.com will give you the opportunity to get a free digital download of the first chapter of my book. So that way, if you like it, read to the bottom of that, and then at the bottom there's a link that'll take you to Amazon to buy it. And I think there's also a little special gift there too. So if the people who get the try before you buy thing and they read it and they like it and they buy it, I'll send them another gift as well.
Well, that we are super grateful, and I always say this, but I always have to reiterate it. We only ask if our guests, if our speakers have a gift, but we never require it, and they're always so willing to give because that's just the it's the caliber of the people we bring on the show and the caliber of people who we know and surround ourselves with. And Steve, that's very, very awesome to give people an actual first chapter, first copy of your book. That's going to be an incredible starter kit for them to jump right on in and learn these processes and start their lives in action from healing their mind, body, and spirit. I absolutely love that, and I appreciate that, and I thank you and honor you for that because that's a huge thing for you to do for them, and I appreciate that. Also, I will keep all of your information that you suggested in the comment section and in the show notes. So if you're listening to this on the replay, either on iTunes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Play, you will be able to find information to reach out to Steve and these resources in the show notes. And also, if you want to reach out to him directly, he's also pretty active here on Facebook, or has been getting active on Facebook. So he's a great person to reach out to on social media.
Thanks a lot. And obviously we all hope to see you at a live conference when the time comes. One of our Happitude Warrior conferences. Love to see you there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for that reminder. We will be announcing some dates here in the near future. So stay tuned, but please come meet Dr. Steve Taubman in person at one of our live events coming soon. And in the meantime, reach out to him, get a copy of his book. And Steve, we thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being one of my guests. And I'm just super happy and proud and honored to be a friend of yours and to know who you are and to be a part of all this process. And I too am learning as I get to evaluate my bulletproof habits and capabilities and working on, becoming that force that I hope to be. And so I appreciate you and your guidance and your mentorship on that. I believe that you've put me on the path, and I'm grateful for that.
Beautiful. That makes me feel great.
Good. I made my job then. That's my job. Most people think this podcast is about information, but really it's just me.
Yeah, exactly. I get that.
Build up my friends. That's all I get to do, and I love it.
Awesome.
Well, Steve, thank you very much. And for all my listeners, please reach out to Steve Taubman, get a copy of his book, check it out, start the development of your mindfulness and transfer that to body healing. And this has been another episode of the Circle of Knowledge podcast. Stay tuned, coming at you on the next day when we'll have more guests and more opportunities to apply knowledge in our lives. Thanks, Steve.